Welcome to the Abstract Conversations podcast, where complexity meets clarity, as we bring you approachable conversations with the industry's leading founders, innovators, and thought leaders. I'm your host, Burnt Banksy, founder of Burnt, the core contributor to XION, the generalized abstraction layer.
Austin, we've known each other for quite some time now. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the podcast. The video was actually supposed to be so we could coordinate when we're speaking better, but, you've seemed to have broken that in 5 seconds. Anyway, why don't you give, the listeners or the viewers, depending on the platform, back home, kind of an introduction. What is Omni? Who are you? Give me the whole, give me the whole nine.
Cool. So I'm a co-founder of Omni. Omni, at a super high level, basically, we're trying to solve the fragmentation problem that's happening in the Ethereum ecosystem. Ethereum is scaling through the adoption of rollups, and this is great. Actually, a majority of activity is happening on rollups now compared to the base layer one network. What's not great about it, though, is that all the users and capital are now fragmented and distributed across these different rollup platforms. And so this is really like degrading the global network effects that Ethereum had. And so that's the problem that we're solving with Omni.
Got it. And so I guess what made you realize this was a problem? How did you come to solve this instead of, kind of something else?
Long journey for sure. So we actually, when we originally started this company, we were building a DeFi protocol. It was called Rift Finance. And just a quick overview on like the history of that and like how we actually got to Omni. So we built this DeFi protocol. We don't need to go like too deep into like all the details of the mechanisms and stuff. Went really well though. We hit like 50 mil TVL in the first couple days. This was more in the like crazy DeFi era. It was fun. It was a good time, but so we started to scale this to multiple platforms. And what you need to think about as a DeFi protocol, if you are moving to different platforms, primarily is fragmentation. It's like, if you're going to like build up this base, you don't want to have multiple instantiations of your protocol because then you're not going to be able to like actually accumulate those global network effects that allow you to get better economic effects, like better execution, better lending rates. So we started to look into like how we could actually build this infrastructure layer to take Rift across all these different domains, because especially we saw rollups at this time. Basically, we built pretty deep conviction that the vast majority of the future activity in crypto was going to happen on rollups. So we were particularly thinking about how do we build this in a way where we can have global liquidity across all these different rollups. We hit a point where we had a few realizations where really, one, it was going to be extremely hard to do. That was kind of the first thing there. Like this was a very intensive infrastructure project. But two, we realized that the complexity of building it in a generalized fashion, as opposed to solving it specifically for the DeFi protocol that we built, would actually just be far more valuable and like value add to the rest of the ecosystem, far beyond really like what any DeFi protocol would be able to add. And so, we built up pretty deep conviction that the future of Ethereum was going to be on rollups. And so we decided to pivot full time into building this infrastructure layer that allowed protocols to build across all rollups without fragmenting their liquidity as like the primary product that we were building.
Nice. That's awesome. And so I guess you had mentioned that you're a co-founder.
Mm-hmm.
Can you kind of go into the relationship? I could only imagine how did you deal with this, kind of sudden change or I guess, more product level to infrastructure level, kind of, and then how is that amplified by, the kind of co-founder?
Yeah, it's a great question. So my co-founder, his name is Tyler. He's great. Obviously there are many challenges. So for a bit of context as well, which is important in thinking about what this pivot was actually like, we had raised 18 mil and then pivoted afterwards. So it was like quite demanding from a founder like stress level.
I could only imagine.
Yeah. I mean, I'm curious to like touch on like your end of things and kind of the progression of Burnt over time as well here. But honestly, Tyler is fantastic. We're super complementary in our like skill sets. We both studied computer science at Harvard, and that's how we know one another. But so we're like a very technical like co-founding team at large. But Tyler is focused on building out parts of this network that are just strictly complementary to what I'm doing. We want to grow in like different dimensions, and so really it's been super, I want to hear your perspective on this because it's been super helpful to have him throughout this entire process, really like keep us sane when you're like deciding to pivot after raising $18 million. Obviously there's deep conviction in the direction that we were taking there, but Yeah, not gonna lie,
Yeah.
that is stressful. We talked with our investors, and they all backed in, and we like laid out kind of the like rationale for like why we thought this was gonna be worth so much more. And they all backed us, and like grateful to all of our investors for that as well. But Tyler's played a key role in that. Tell me about how it's been on Burnt's end. Yeah, I'm curious to hear a bit on your progression here.
It's definitely different because, I mean, it's similar in a lot of ways, but I think, kind of the approach is very different. And I think who we are kind of as people in kind of in that way speaks to that as well, which was, for us, we also went from product to infrastructure. Like, sure, we built some of the standards, but, we were a DeFi focused NFT marketplace, and for us, it was, we can't onboard people. The steps are too complicated, right? And so we also kind of made this decision to go into, we had to go into this decision to build this infrastructure, right? And, kind of the, I don't know if you know Ash on the team, but, kind of comes from Gravity Bridge, the first bridge from Ethereum to, kind of Cosmos and core Tendermint team. But it was a different dynamic, right? Because I don't think that I know we had talked a lot during kind of that time, and I think you did help keep me sane in a lot of ways because I think like we were both in this kind of same boat of like, holy shit, like we gotta hang on till winter kind of thing, right? But I think, the approach that you took was definitely different. I think for me it was, you guys definitely took a very methodical approach, which was like, very structured, very organized, and you really got everyone on board at the same time. I took almost the exact opposite approach, which was like this continuous sprint of like realizing that we had to continually build like deeper into the stack until we eventually landed like on a layer 1, which you couldn't even get really lower than. Like, we're not going to be building sequencers or anything for this, right? But a lot of it was like, I think the vision that we had still kind of stuck. And I think just me as a person of just like extreme, I don't want to say like extreme confidence, but this kind of just, we're going to figure it out. I know that. I know where we're going. I have no idea how we're getting there. And it's just, and I think we were in stealth for a year just trying to, I think the vision of like Web 2 to Web 3 is always stuck. But I didn't have, we didn't have a co-founder to like, keep it sane. It was very much, and then even like a lot of investors kind of found out when we announced our rebrand. And they're like, "I'm sorry, what are you now?"
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting to think though. It's almost like a cliche in startups. Like as companies grow, they like dive into solving their own problems and create more value than like the original product that way. And that's clearly like rooted in both of our histories there, and like how these products were evolving.
Yeah, and I think like, I think that's an interesting point, right? Because, and I think we were different audiences, I would say that we were kind of dealing with, but, we're just so early in this ecosystem. And I think, I mean, we should also, I don't know if you kind of want to talk about where you were before. I know where you were before, before you started Rift, but, or sorry, Omni. But, if you want to kind of go into that afterwards, we totally can. But, I know we've both been in this industry for a very long time. And it's, I think a lot of what the decisions we did, kind of for that was this realization of, we wanted to build products. We wanted to build, for you, it was a DeFi focused. I remember when you first came to, I remember when we first spoke about it, it was 100x leverage on stable coins. Like, I remember this, and then, we even had like, what if it's a hedge fund of hedge funds? There's in so many iterations, but I think we've always been like these kind of people, we wanted to build products, but the underlying infrastructure just wasn't there. And I think it's really nice. I mean, it's good and bad, but, when you get that kind of bull market crash and you get to enjoy a bear market, you get to really work on the like you get to work in silence. You don't have to worry about these TVL numbers because they do not matter. They are not there, and you can build what you need to build. And I think we both took kind of similar approaches. But I guess for the people back home, so they don't think I'm crazy, maybe how did you get into crypto? Let's do there, and we'll come back to where we were.
Yeah. So I originally was studying computer science, and one summer just got really into it. basically, this was a bit before the 2017 hype that was really happening my senior year. I forget exactly what caught my attention, but basically I ended up studying this whole summer. I had an internship at Microsoft, but I don't know, it's Microsoft. They didn't
Microsoft,
really, yeah, they didn't expect me to do anything. So I just got to like learn to program Solidity that whole summer, basically. And it got to a certain point where, I mean, yeah, I'm like very much in crypto on a principle level. The reason there's a very like deep libertarian like streak in me that
of
like
course.
crypto satisfies that I wouldn't be able to hit with any other technology stack. And so I remember as I was learning to program Solidity, I built this like basically a poor man's implementation of a DAO. And you could like vote and stuff. And I was like, oh, we're gonna run governments on this thing. Like it felt like very clear to me that like the stuff was going to like yeah, like obviously we got a lot of work to do to get to like a level like that. But it did like very much strike me like, oh, this is like an open, neutral, like economic foundation for the internet. And that's just clearly a missing primitive that we have in the internet today. Like we have data that can move around seamlessly, but like anytime we're trying to move around money, it is a huge pain. And we just have to go through companies that take like 2%. So it just felt like one, on a philosophical level, something that I think the world needed. And on two, on a computer science level, it felt like a missing primitive in the internet protocol stack.
Nice. And so I guess kind of walk me through how you went from this, I guess, DAO platform to, I guess Rift, right? Like I would say, the governance to DeFi track, I think they're similar, but I guess what was that jump like? And walk me through that.
Yeah. So there was a whole company in between in between those two points.
I knew that, but for the audience, I'm pretending like I don't. I see you like every week.
Yeah. But so basically, I raised for my first company around the time that I graduated. And I built that company for 2 years. At this point in time, it's actually quite funny looking back. I think anybody who's been in the industry for, like 5+ years, like we go in these loops. We like things like history rhymes. And so actually back in 2017, 2018, I was working on layer 2s at that time. But layer 2s at that time, it was just, they were called things like Lightning Network and state channels. Yep. They were not called rollups. It was a different implementation for a scaling solution. And these actually did an extremely good job at what they were built to do, which was payments. The thing is, they weren't Turing complete. So my first company, for example, it was actually an interoperability network that connected different blockchain layer 2 ecosystems. So we made it so that you could make payments across Ethereum to the Bitcoin network and across other networks as well. And it was all through using these like hyper-performant payment scaling solutions. Just as like some data points there, like literally we were processing like thousands of transactions a second at certain points. We processed like over 10 billion payments by the time I sold it. So it was very exciting to see like how much scaling was happening at this point in time. But it was just payments. And so like I sold it to Ripple because they're super focused on payments, built it out a bit more at Ripple. But then when I was there, DeFi started to happen. And DeFi to me was just like a very clear example of an actual use case for this stuff. I was very sold on like the philosophy of this technology, but definitely, I would not call the ICOs era of 2017 like use cases. I think there is something you can say about like decentralized fundraising, and that is like a very conceptually fascinating thing. But the manifestation in 2017, well, I would not say that is like a conceptually interesting thing. That was just kind of madness. But DeFi is like a very clearly like natural progression of money. And so it made much more sense now, like how we were actually going to like build use cases around these tools in general. And so that's kind of where Rift originally came from. I was doing like, once I quit Ripple, I basically just spent 6 months researching protocols and farming. It was fantastic. Like at this point in time, I was making more money, just moving my coins around, getting paid out in like bunny tokens, these random things, than I was even making at Ripple. And so, basically in those 6 months, I was just identifying like what I thought the best product opportunities were. And that's where Rift originally came from.
Awesome. You seem to, I mean, and I know you, but you seem to, one of your strengths, and I guess I've never really kind of talked to you about this, but it's definitely this kind of ideation. Like, I think you go through a lot of different ideation patterns and I guess thinking. Do you have like a routine or a ritual when it comes to kind of approaching these new ideas and new challenges, or is it completely different every time?
So the way that we really, I think the best way to do this, and just like obviously, I've like learned a lot, even from my like first company to this company. There are things that I was doing terribly in my first company. And so like this is one thing that I think I've gotten like better at. And the best way to do this is like prune things over time and like reduce complexity, and just like build up things that you have like deep conviction in. And so like one fundamental thing for Omni was building up conviction that rollups were the future of Ethereum. It just felt like we had to do a lot of like deep dive into like the research that was more frontier at the time, because these things were just like not really deployed at production level. And it was very much like, okay, cool, rollups might help Ethereum in the future, but was not locked in. Basically, one huge bet that we were taking with Omni. Omni is like a solution that's designed for the Ethereum ecosystem. It's kind of like an Ethereum native messaging protocol. And, you know, when we started building it, it took a lot of conviction that like this path really was the future for Ethereum. And what that required was us to like go deep into the like research on rollups and like how all these things would work at the time. And now we can see this thesis like very much playing out. Like more activity is happening on rollups than on L1 itself. But that was one thing that like kept us sane and like really helped us like build conviction when we committed to going down a path that did feel like it's possible we just like missed the target here, because it was going to take a very long time to build something as complex as Omni. But so we needed to be right in the direction that we were taking, and it's playing out now. Like very grateful for that. But that's one of the like the fundamental things I think as we were making that decision that was important.
Nice. And so interesting. And I guess where did that conviction start, or where did that flicker start? Where, you know, before it was a conviction, you know, how did that start being an idea?
I think my co-founder Tyler and I have always been we've just always been involved in the kind of like Ethereum research community and like staying in tune with like new proposals for how we can actually scale these things. You know, you all are redesigning a blockchain from the ground up to make it more usable. There's a lot of work that goes on in the Ethereum community in terms of kind of like patching on top of what is there, because we can't throw out the fundamental chain that is there. So there's a lot of work and like innovation and effort that goes into abstracting things away. And so Tyler and I have always been very just up to date on things like that. And so the more involved you are at the frontier of the like research community in crypto, the easier it is to like identify upcoming trends. And this is happening right now as well. For anybody who's like starting a company right now, honestly, the number one thing I would recommend is go get involved in the research community. Go identify like the smartest people in the space and like see what they are writing about and make sure that you like really understand what they're saying. And that'll help you build a longer term view of the future of crypto than most people have in their heads right now. And that'll position you so that you can like start building a company that is best positioned to thrive in the future of crypto compared to other people who just don't have as much of that kind of like research experience or awareness.
Anyone you recommend, specifically, maybe someone who helped you?
So I think it's actually resources here are more important than like individual people, because some people come in, some people go out and stuff. Obviously, there's a number of researchers at the Ethereum Foundation who are focusing on a number of different things. You know, we have people who are focusing on progressing towards like forms of sharding. We have a lot of people who are like thinking about PBS. But really, resources wise, if I could just give people one, it's like the Ethereum Magicians Forum. Like if you want to get started just in one place, just go subscribe and like keep up to date with what these people are like posting about, because that really is one of the most like frontier research forums where people are talking about these more novel ideas for where the space might go.
Got it. Is there anything aside from, of course, what you're building that kind of excites you in those forums?
100%. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think like there are so many things that we could be working on if it wasn't Omni. I think in our perspective here is that the fragmentation caused by rollups is an existential threat to Ethereum. If we do not solve this problem, it's possible that Ethereum, the global network effects, continue to decay, because that's what's happening right now. And if that is the case, there are like very compelling alternative solutions that do not provide the kind of like core properties that make Ethereum valuable in terms of like openness, neutrality, and censorship resistance. People could just go to Solana. It's way cheaper. You're going to get confirmation on your transactions much faster than the Ethereum ecosystem. And so that like is why we're building Omni, is because we do see this as like the biggest existential threat. I think PBS right now is one of the most interesting things going on, because it's almost like this design space that we realized needed to be addressed after many of these fundamental networks were built. And for anybody who doesn't know what PBS is, it's the concept of proposer-builder separation. And so really it comes from MEV, this idea that you can kind of like reorder transactions to extract value from them. But this has like massive implications for the actual like network architecture. And so I think there's a ton of opportunities to get involved there, because it's very much like an unsolved design space. There's a ton of fascinating work there. I think another area that I'm quite interested in is just simply the design space of rollups at large. We're already seeing, tens of these like deployed like at large scale in production. There's probably like 100 plus that are, deployed, but aren't controlling like hundreds of millions of dollars. We think there's going to be thousands of these though. And I think there are very natural reasons for that, because you can experiment with the VM. You can experiment with different languages to make it easier to onboard new developers. You can play around with the security model to make transactions cheaper. You can do something similar to what you guys are doing, where you're abstracting away a lot of this and allow people to like authorize transactions with different like signature curves that are like more compatible with hardware that we have, that you can just like scan your face and that can like allow you to authorize a transaction. So I think the design space at the actual roll-up level, most of the projects that have been deployed at scale today have targeted being like EVM equivalent, which just means you can build applications the same way that you build them on L1. I actually think that's one of the least interesting things about rollups, though. Like I understand why that's the first step and how we're beginning to like step into the rollup space. But there's so much more it really opens up the opportunity for us to bring so many more of the other like software engineering tools that we have built and bring them into crypto alongside the developers that are very familiar with those technology stacks.
Oh, nice. Thank you for that. And I guess I'll be looking at the forums to kind of read those as well. Cool. It's funny. I think we've been out. I would definitely say that I've been out of, aside from like 4.3 through 7 stuff, and I think everything abstraction related. I definitely have been out of the roll up game, which is very funny to kind of hear. I guess, more specifically towards you, but like, what are the roadblocks stopping us from being able to kind of connect everything and really solve the fragmentation issue? Because you're right. It's very real. It's been going on. And, I think the sooner we solve it, the sooner that we hit, a really big snowball effect, and stop seeing this kind of, fragmentation where everything is so competitive rather than collaborative.
Yeah, 100%. I really think fundamentally it comes down to a lack of open standards around this. I think all of these different solutions for allowing communication across roll-up platforms are effectively proprietary today. And so what it demands is that there's kind of 3 different categories in the way that I see it. There's really asset issuers. When you're thinking about how to move assets around these different rollups, you have to consider the people who are actually running or like created these assets. There's dApps in general, so the developers who are like building applications. And then 3, there's the platforms themselves, like the rollups. If you adopt kind of a proprietary interoperability solution, you are ceding sovereignty in some form. Whether you are the asset issuer, so for example, OFTs are an example. OFTs are effectively layer 0's wrap tokens. You are making yourself existentially dependent upon layer 0 if you put your asset into the OFT proprietary standard that they have built. And then for developers, anybody who integrates or builds an application upon one of these proprietary standards locks themselves into this interoperability platform. And same with blockchains. Like if the entire roll up had all the assets bridged into it from one of these interoperability protocols, it is like ceded sovereignty to that. And that's just poor abstraction design, in my opinion. You need to have open standards around this stuff. And I mean, but I mean abstraction in a way.
I know. We say the word abstraction, a lot.
Yeah. Rightfully so, though. In two senses. So there's like one, designing proper abstraction. So like what are the like interfaces? And then there's two, abstracting away the complexity here. And you can actually achieve the second with good designs in the first.
Yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of our approaches, and I think you kind of nailed it, right? Which is everything is kind of a patch and you can't just fundamentally throw out everything. And, I think when we look at something like 4337, it's very social consensus, right? It's, it's on a smart contract level and social consensus. And I think it's why you see, for us, we're dealing with a different kind of fragmentation, right? We have a key management fragmentation. We have, up and down the stack, there's different standards as it kind of relates to kind of these, these smart contracts and signature curves and, being able to, whether it be ETH or, a roll up, I think everyone's trying to kind of solve it in different ways, which ends up, to your point, kind of hurting, what we're very fortunate with is, and I hope one day that we can get to a point where, we're able to kind of utilize security of ETH, and I think we can work with realistically it could be done with like Celestia and like even, but I think I think you guys are really kind of onto something when it comes to design, and and I guess to kind of maybe bring this back to more of you guys, what is your approach on the network design, right, of Omni? How have you guys been coming from genesis of idea to kind of architecture, and what are these design trade-offs that you have to make?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question because we have spent a lot of time designing the fundamental architecture of this network, again in line with what are the proper abstractions that need to be made. So the way Omni is designed is it is a blockchain. It is, however, not an end user facing blockchain. It is really a blockchain that is custom built to be a highly performant complement to the layer 1 Ethereum network, specifically to fulfill this purpose of uniting all these different roll-up platforms with a secure and low latency mechanism to communicate with one another. So that's kind of our design goals there. It's just to enumerate them, it's low latency and high security. Really, and then also on top of that, it's very important to have a fantastic developer experience. But from a network level, achieving low latency and high security is very challenging to do at large. There's a lot of different ways that you could go about achieving this. What we ended up using was a mechanism through which we can derive security from Ethereum L1 itself. That's why I'm saying it's not a blockchain that is competing with Ethereum. It's actually a very just performant complement that is able to derive crypto economic security from the platform itself. So ETH, the asset, we can derive crypto economic security from that to create this super secure highway for roll-up communication effectively. And the way that we did this, it's actually, we originally built this as a Cosmos network. We built it with the Cosmos SDK and used Ethernet. However, we got to a certain point though that we realized that for what we were trying to achieve, we needed to build more custom network architecture. So we're actually using the Aragon client now, which is about, I think it's 2% adoption in the Ethereum network, but it's far more performant, orders of magnitude in some dimensions than what we were able to achieve with Cosmos.
So you talked about open standards, yet, I mean, I feel at some point you have competition, even Arbitrum and Optimism. Can you kind of elaborate on what you mean by that?
Yeah. So, it's weird. Business is done in a very, everybody that is going to do well in crypto has to have a very long-term orientation. And really what that takes is an understanding that at the end of the day here, what all of our goals are is to, not to be cliche, but grow the pie. Nobody in crypto today is satisfied if crypto stops growing in adoption. Like we're all trying to build like an open and like neutral economic foundation for literally the entire world. We're far from that today. And so, the way we think about it is we need to establish open standards for the Ethereum ecosystem at large so that these rollups can collaborate with one another. Even if, Arbitrum and Optimism are more competitive, long term, I think we're all aligned in the sense that like working with open standards so that they can share users and liquidity more actually promotes innovation at the rollup level and will help make everybody build better products that serve end users and accelerate the adoption rate. So it's fascinating, like working with these different teams and seeing how some of these platforms that seem a bit more competitive upon initial glance, there is at the end of the day a fundamental alignment in regards to just where we're all going and like what we all want to achieve years from now.
And so, where do you want to be years from now?
Years from now, I want, at least in the Ethereum ecosystem, I want everything to be happening on rollups and for those rollups to be have decentralized sequencer sets that are preserving censorship resistance, and we aren't like bottlenecked by Ethereum L1 today. That's what's happening. Anytime users or capital really want to move from rollup to rollup, we have to go back down to Ethereum L1, possibly even wait 7 days, pay a fee there, deposit into this other rollup. That's insane. Like effectively, the simplest way to think about Omni is you have this reality today where in order to move from one rollup to another, you have to go all the way back to Ethereum L1, move to another rollup, and then you get to go up to that rollup. Ethereum is like the performant complement to, or Omni is the performant complement to Ethereum that gives rollups a direct connection so that you don't have to go be congested by the Ethereum layer 1 network itself so that they can collaborate with one another. You all have been building this really to solve the original problem that you were facing of just like the friction of onboarding people into the like marketplace. Like there were exciting use cases springing up around NFTs. There's a ton of friction there. Like I know that you all are thinking about abstracting away complexity in multiple different places. Can you touch on some of these like key components that you are focused on and making it easier for users to adopt crypto technologies?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's one specifically that I think we're probably in like, in the not too distant future we'll probably be working on together, which is, I think even the concept of interoperability. Like, it's funny that you say like, oh, if a user wants to go from Arbitrum, to kind of another L1, they have to, deposit and, wait a lot of, wait many days, and pay on there and this, that, or the other. But it's, I think taking it a step further and being like, my mom has no idea what Arbitrum is. My mom has no idea what Optimism is. Right. And, I think taking it one step further and saying, let's just let people use products. And I just don't see that products are being built in this, in this ecosystem, because we're not there yet, right? Like, even if you are extremely into it, you're running into problems, right? Which you talk about, right? And I think, when we talk about working with Omni in the future, this is exactly where I see it. It's that, abstracted interoperability and being able to be, whether it's moving, whether it's kind of sending messages, whether it's transferring, I think there's an omni-chain world, that'll exist whether you have the technical prowess or not. And I think for us, that's one of the most exciting things. You can talk about gas fees and, and signing with Face ID. And at this point, I think that's boring, but only because I've been working on that for a year.
And credit where it's due. I think that's very exciting.
But, I think there's so much more, which is really exciting. And it's also more complicated too, right? But, that kind of goes along with saying, oh, hey, this multi-billion-dollar industry that people are kind of pouring money into solving these minute details. It's like, you shouldn't worry about that. Like, and I think getting to a point like that, which is like, even as we record this podcast, if you're listening on Spotify, you shouldn't really have to know, the hosting or what it's written in or really anything like that. And, I think that informational barriers is, and will always be, that kind of last remaining, that last remaining peg that we're trying really, really hard to kind of remove.
Yeah, I totally see that. And like, it's kind of stack wide. Like there needs to be work or like complexity abstracted at like multiple layers of the process here, because when you like move through the onboarding process of any crypto application today, if you're starting from zero, like it's not like you can solve removing gas fees and it's great past that. Like there's far more complexity that arises in the user experience, and it comes from like other parts of the stack being complex at large.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's different variations of knowledge, right, of where the complexity lies, right? You can have people, like you who are living on the forums and completely understand everything, from a very granular, minute detail to someone who's like, oh, well, what's the difference between ETH and Solana? Like, it's just two different coins, and it's funny the different conversations that we had, of what's the future, right? Is it multi-chain? Is it omni-chain? Is it roll-ups? And I think they're all correct, and it's funny because I was talking to someone yesterday who had asked me about moats in this industry, and it's like, everyone says we're onboarding the next billion users. We haven't even onboarded the first billion users, right? And we have too small of the market share to be thinking we've made this kind of right answer right now, right? And, I think everything is just pure conviction, right? You can have the best head start in the world, but if you lose conviction towards the end, then you're going to be outpaced by someone who is relentless and has a vision and will do anything to kind of see it through. And I think it's at that point, not to sound cliche, but it's the ideas that kind of live on. I think this is an interesting question actually posed by one of our audience members. Where do you think more innovation is happening, in agricultural farming or yield farming?
Unfortunately enough, I think yield farming.
No way. I was going to say agriculture. There's so many
I would hope.
new tractors out a year. I don't know. So many. It's like
what do
John
you know
Deere.
about
I don't know what he's doing. He's probably making a lot of tractors. I don't know, different corn seed dispensing mechanisms.
I feel like, I don't know if you've been following, like points is the new meme, I feel, with farming. Like
Marginify, yeah, of course.
Yeah, and like Blast, like Frentech.
Yep.
We're now at the point in the cycle where I've seen people talking about how points are a fundamental new primitive, and it's just immediate flashbacks back to like 2020, 2021 as like DeFi was picking up steam, and people were like, this is a new paradigm of how we like think about things. And like, credit where it's due, the DeFi primitives that stuck around, that is totally true. These are like fundamentally new, exciting mechanisms. But a lot of the, like 10,000% APYs, you cannot call that a new paradigm. That's just like a marketing scheme.
Yeah. I mean, it's always been like that. If you remember Olympus DAO, that was like the very most widely accepted. Yeah, 3-3. And it was just, it's a Ponzi. I mean, more people buy in, the more people buy in. But, and it's a new primitive. It's like, my man, they're putting returns in numbers of Lamborghinis. Like, how are we not seeing this? Austin, thanks so much for hopping on to the Abstract Conversations podcast. I really enjoyed having you on. I'll probably see you tomorrow. But
I'll see you in the new year.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Wow, you're leaving me alone. All right. Well, is there anything that you have to say, kind of any closing remarks for the people back home?
Yeah, thanks for tuning in. Excited to see what you all are building at Burnt, and appreciate you hosting me.